This is everything I use for my day-to-day Rust development. Every tool, every setup, every AI workflow I use to write blazingly fast Rust code. If I'm not busy creating peak Rust Glaze content on YouTube. And at the end, I'll also explain why I rewrote one of the most popular dev tools in Rust, a tool you're probably using right now, and how it ended up doubling my productivity. Let's dive right in. First, let's start with the IDE. Now, Cursor used to be my daily driver for the longest time. Previously, I used VS Code, so I really liked that I could just bring in all my previous extensions and setup. The reason I originally liked Cursor was because of the UI. It just had a much better UI for interacting with AI. And the reason I don't use it anymore is, funny enough, the UI. Now, Cursor recently changed its UI so that when you open up Cursor, you see this screen. You can see some of your repositories, automations, customizations, and then you're able to chat with AI. Now, I personally really don't like this entire experience. What I want to see when I open an IDE is code. It's a way to get to my projects. And unfortunately, now Cursor has hid this UI behind this little IDE button at the top, which personally I really don't prefer. So recently I switched over to using Zed. And I like Zed for a few reasons. First of all, I really like the minimalistic UI. Second of all, Zed is built in Rust, which means it is very snappy. You can open up files very quickly, and it doesn't eat up RAM like other editors I've used before. So I can open up many Zed windows, and it doesn't slow down my computer. I've also heard a lot of good things about Rust Rover from JetBrains, but for now, I'm really enjoying using Zed. The last thing I'll mention here is this shell prompt, which is using the Starship prompt. Starship is a minimal and customizable cross-shell prompt, and it's also built in Rust. Now, when it comes to development workflow, there are a couple tools I like to use. The first one is Bacon. Bacon runs alongside your editor and can perform actions automatically when your code changes. And this is really convenient for rapid prototyping. For example, when your code changes, Bacon can build your app and run your tests automatically. The other tool I like is Cargo Next Test, which is a test runner for Rust with a really nice UI, but more importantly, it runs your tests 3 times faster than the built-in test runner. And when it comes to the code itself, there are a couple things I like to do to make sure a Rust codebase is set up for development. The first thing is adding pre-commit hooks to run Rust format and also cargo Clippy. This just ensures that formatting stays consistent and the code being written is idiomatic, at least according to the Clippy rules. I also like to usually add a script to run a cargo audit on command. So essentially cargo audit will audit your codebase for any known security vulnerabilities. And you can run this in CI/CD as well. Now that we have the codebase set up, let's talk about AI workflows. Now, the first AI tool I like to use in my development workflow is Atlas, which is a browser created by OpenAI. Now, the nice thing about Atlas is if I'm on some web page, for example, the Tokyo documentation, and I'm looking at the mutex struct, I can open up ChatGPT in the side panel, so I can do things like quickly summarize the web page, for example. This is especially useful because it also links to your ChatGPT account, so it has full context of your previous conversations as well. The second AI tool I tend to use is called RustBrain, which is actually something we've created at Let's Get Rusty. RustBrain is essentially an AI-powered Rust mentor. So here, if I have some questions about Rust, I know that I'll get personalized and also more accurate answers because we've specifically trained it on idiomatic Rust and test it against base LLMs. It also provides things like citations so you can see where it's getting its information. If you want to check out RustBrain, I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, when it comes to using an AI harness, personally, I'm a huge fan of Claude Code. Now, besides the fact that the Claude models are good at coding, the biggest benefit of Claude Code and its ecosystem is it just works. Sure, you can spend your time trying to optimize your workflow, try different harnesses with multiple models, and constantly have to tweak and update things as the AI landscape changes. But what I found is if you just stick with Claude Code, it works really well, the feature set is extensive, and its integrations with things like Claude Desktop and Claude Mobile make it really enjoyable to use. The best analogy I can draw is it's kind of like the Apple ecosystem. You could choose to build your own computer and have a very customized Linux distro installed, or you can buy a MacBook, an iPhone, and AirPods and have everything just work. Now, when it comes to Claude specifically, there are a couple things I like to do to set up my repos. The first thing is having a Claude file or a agents.md file which links to the Claude file in the root of your directory that explains the purpose and architecture of that piece of software. And you can also have Claude.md files in subdirectories to guide agents when making decisions about code in those particular subfolders. The other thing is I like to keep a docs folder which has high-level architectural decisions documented so that in the future, agents have context about why a certain architecture was chosen or why a certain technical decision was made. The other thing I've been experimenting with is creating more sophisticated agentic workflows with Claude through MD files and skills. And one great place to start is to modify an existing workflow. And this is one I found that I really like called GStack, which was created by Gary Tan, the CEO of Y Combinator. And in his Claude Code setup, there are 23 opinionated tools that serve as a CEO, designer, engineering manager, release manager, doc engineer, and a QA engineer. I've been playing around with GStack for a couple of days now, and so far, I really like it. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is a couple of tools that have dramatically increased my development productivity. The first one is Whisperflow, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. Essentially, it's a voice-to-text tool which allows you to speak instead of type. And it's honestly incredible how much faster you can build software by speaking instead of typing. The other tool is Speechify, which allows you to highlight any text and have it read aloud. This is also incredibly useful, especially if you're speaking with an LLM. It comes back with a bunch of text, and instead of reading it, you just highlight it and have it read aloud to you. Now, there's one issue I've faced with both of these tools. The first one is customization. The ability to make little tweaks that would make the software just a little bit better for my own personal use cases. The second thing is the ability to combine these tools together. So instead of having two separate tools, two separate subscriptions, I personally would love to just have one tool that I can work with. And the other thing is these tools tend to take up a lot of RAM, and they've slowed down my computer a couple of times, and also they've crashed a couple of times as well. And so eventually I decided to build my own tool called Murmur, which does voice-to-text and text-to-speech in one tool. It's built with Rust and Tauri, and so far has been extremely efficient in terms of RAM usage and has never crashed on me. The other thing is I can heavily customize this tool. So for example, here I have my refinement prompt, which allows me to just talk to Murmur and then have AI refine my thoughts before handing it off to Claude Code, for example. The other benefit of a tool like this is you get to decide which models are used and how the data is being processed. So there's just a lot more transparency. You can even use local models so your information doesn't get stored on a server somewhere. Building this tool has honestly been a game changer for my development workflow. And in general, I think there's a lot of opportunity for developers to build tools for themselves to aid in development. So that's my Rust development setup, but let me know what tools and workflows you use in the comments section down below. And if you're interested in learning how to write production-grade Rust, check out our Rust Live Accelerator. It's our tailored mentorship program where we help developers go beyond YouTube videos, build production-grade Rust systems, and land their first Rust job. You can join the waitlist for our next cohort by heading over to letsgetrusty.com/join or by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. When you join the waitlist, we'll also send you our Rust developer roadmap as a small gift. So tap the link, join the waitlist, and I'll talk to you very soon.